Doma Sports Talk worldwide with some news from the world of boxing. So y'all know what time it is. You ain't in a rush to get concussed. Now, a couple of big fights, kind of significant fights, happened yesterday, right? Doing them the day after, letting it, sink in a little bit. And, I think we need to focus on the opponents, right? The opponents. It wasn't too many upsets or nothing like that, but the opponents we need to focus on. Very similar to a few weeks back when Belanga, wasn't it Edward Belanga, whatever his name, Belanga, we was up and comer, mean, bad dude, 16 KOs in a row. And Steve Rose, who we know is the opponent, infamous for losing to Gennady Golovkin, Steve Rose did a good job against him, right? So, I thought that in that fight. But we had, for example, we had Ryan Garcia versus Emmanuel Tagoe, right? And props to Ryan Garcia, first of all, for, he's had a long layoff, right? And he's come back in his first fight, and I thought he looked good, right? It went 12 rounds. He didn't get him out of there, which they thought before the fight, and we all know that's what we all thought. We didn't know Emmanuel Tagoe. We didn't think he was going to be able to withstand the onslaughts that's coming his way, and they did come. Your boy Ryan Garcia started walking him down and was trying to get him out of there from the beginning. But Emmanuel Tagoe was elusive, and he did what he had to do to survive the fight. Now, towards the end, he started trying to come on a little bit and give a little offense, but he got hurt again towards the end. But I thought he did a pretty good job considering what we thought that fight was going to look like. And he did, try to make it competitive, seeing as though the odds were against him, right? I mean, he's been held down. Every time he goes down, his head was being held down, and he would still get hit. Nothing was said. He also, it just seemed like, the odds were stacked against him. This is supposed to be a 135-pound fight, and they just moved up to 139 because, Ryan Garcia needed it, So, we're expecting Ryan Garcia. Now, what I'm hearing was that was on pay-per-view. Where I'm at is not, it wasn't, because I wouldn't watch that at all. But pay-per-view, that's not pay-per-view worthy. We got to cut down on his pay-per-views. That's ridiculous. Let people just see that fight. Ryan ain't fought for who knows how long. Another thing, in one country, Germany, for example, they would call Ryan Garcia a former champion. You Germans out there, they said, ehemaliger Weltmeister. I know what the hell that means. That means former champion. No, he's not. He's a former mandatory challenger who did not want to fight the champion, which was not mentioned. Now, I watched it in German. Now, I don't know, but it wasn't mentioned. Right? You're supposed to mention that. That's huge. Here's a mandatory who didn't want to fight the champion. And mention the guy who he didn't want to fight, which is Devin Haney. Now, when it comes to Ryan Garcia, people, you would think, well, this Doma guy doesn't like him. Every time this man talks, you fall in love with him. You just do. Actually, I like Ryan Garcia, man. It's just really, I just don't like entitlement and the things that, they're ignoring the very best. You could, for example, if Ryan Garcia would have came out and just said, something, I'm going to hold up on that Devin Haney fight. I'm kind of not ready. Give me a couple of fights to get ready for his style or something, right? Just giving him props as being the champion that he doesn't want to fight. Boom, I'm all in on Ryan Garcia, right? Because I like the things he says, even about his fallout with Canelo and stuff. I would forgive him in a heartbeat. All we got to do is say sorry to each other and we move on. Those kind of things. Just, you really don't like. It's not about Ryan Garcia not liking him. It's about the injustice that's going on with Devin Haney in the lightweight division, right? And and the people not saying things like, "Hey, here's a mandatory that didn't want to fight Devin Haney," or "Here's a mandatory in Jaime Munguia who doesn't want to fight Demetrius Andrade." You just say those things so you can empower and let the people know who the very best are, right? Those kind of things. But Ryan Garcia handled his business. But I just thought Emmanuel Tagoe, did a good job of surviving. You're coming in, no one knows you, everyone's expecting you to just, fall down. He was elusive enough. He was able to take some blows. He dished out a little bit. I didn't think it was enough punishment or enough punches coming from him to make Garcia really have to worry about defense. He did a few times, but he didn't really have to worry about defense. He looked good. He looked like the guy I'm about to talk about, Gennady Golovkin. When Gennady Golovkin was fighting junior midweights, just walking them down and just, it's nothing coming back. I think Ryan Garcia, before he starts talking about some of the heavy hitters. He needs to have another fight where the guy has a little bit more punching power, so he would have to work on his defense before getting into the very, very top. Plus, Ryan Garcia, just from GP, needs to have 2 fights before he can talk about anything. And I thought he said something good afterwards. He said, I'm not calling people out. I'm maturing. We're going to fight whatever happens. I'm not calling people out. And it's good because it's really, you know, when you called out Gervonta Davis, when you're the mandatory for Devin Haney, you should have said, hey, Tank, I'll get to you. Well, you got only a regular title. I don't want that. That's not worth nothing. That's, you know, just a little bit more than a franchise title. I don't want that. I'm going to get the real one from Devin Haney, seeing as though I'm his mandatory. Those kind of things. But all hail to Emmanuel Tagoe. Now, another opponent that impressed the hell out of me was, you know, Ryota Murata, the opponent of Gennady Golovkin, who first, start with the guy who won the fight, Gennady Golovkin. I know he's 40 years old. I know he's been out 2 years or whatever, but he looked good to me. I know we're going to say he could have did this and he could have did that better and he could have did this and could have did that better. But listen, you getting in the ring, Gennady Golovkin, to withstand what he withstood and to still come out on top, right? Throwing that, who throws that Bud Spencer overhand looping left hand or overhand right? Right, just, you know, that look like that could hurt your wrist doing that. You better be perfect technique. He does a lot, and he gets hit. You're not hurting Gennady Golovkin when you're hitting him up top. You're only going to hurt him to the body. I think Golovkin looked pretty good for the time he was off. Am I down with Golovkin? Not like I used to be. Used to love the man. But, you know, you're not going to be able to, you know, you unify against Ryota Murata, and you wait 2 years for him. And Demetrius Andrade is screaming. So is Charlo. Right, and that's just not cool, right? And then if you look at any pound-for-pound list, Golovkin's above the guys that he won't fight, similar to Canelo. So I'm not down with that. But I still, even though I'm not down with that, still impressed of what this man can take from punches, right? He can take some punches, and I also like the fact of what Gennady Golovkin did in the middle of the fight after finding out, you know what, walking this guy down, he ain't letting me. But we're going to talk about that when we talk about Murata. Let me change my game plan and outbox this guy and then get him out of here. And I just think he did a great job in stopping Murata in round 9. I think that Gennady Golovkin looked pretty good. And, you know, when I look at people like that, like a Ryan Garcia or a Gennady Golovkin, that's when you ask the question like I ask, is this man will not fight Andrade? This man, I don't think Andrade is not going to do what Murata did. Andrade would probably beat him another way, but... You ain't going to find nobody that's going to do what Murata did. So that shows me how good an Andrade must be if a guy on the level of a Canelo and a Gennady Golovkin won't fight him. It's got to be ridiculous. And I'm looking at Ryan Garcia. Every punch he throws seems hard as hell. He's scared to fight a Devin Haney. That shows you how good these fighters are. Because these are great fighters that won't fight Devin Haney and Demetrius Andrade and the likes. It's ridiculous. But anyway, to Murata, I'm going to tell you, I was writing stuff down, little stuff, like at the beginning of the fight, it was the jab from Golovkin versus the pressure from Murata. How many guys you see going to a Gennady Golovkin fight and pressure him? Pressure. Now, I ain't talking about what Canelo did in the second fight. You know how much props Canelo got when he just stood there in the pocket? Because, you know, Mexican style, and so he stood there in the pocket. We gave him the second fight just because he stood in the pocket. Let's not forget that. Canelo didn't even win the second fight, really. But because he fought him in the pocket, it was like, oh, shoot, you was asking for it. He stood there. Wait a minute. Could we still count the blows that landed? No. Just because he stood in the pocket. Murata did more than staying in the pocket in the first 4 or 5 rounds. I'm talking about he was chasing Golovkin. I'm looking for the action. I am looking for what the kids say nowadays, the smoke and all of that, right? I'm looking for coming at him, throwing more punches, landing more punches, okay? Now, I don't think anybody, like after the 4th round, I even wrote a note. I said, as of here, nothing else, he has nothing else to lose, Murata, after the first 4 rounds. Because I think he fought Gennady Golovkin in the first 4 or 5 rounds better than anybody. That's up to Kell Brook did the same thing. Kell Brook did well in the first 4 rounds against Gennady Golovkin. But he did better than any Canelo fight. He did better than Jacobs did in the first 4 rounds. Jacobs was tentative. He won, Jacobs, I think, but he was very tentative. It wasn't like, I'm coming here to beat the hell out of you with total belief in my game. Now I'm gonna beat you at your game. I'm walking you down, and I'm trying to throw punches, and I'm taking some to land some. I was impressed with that. Murata can take a wallop because he was getting that. You know what? He's getting hit. You know, after like round 5, 6, when Gennady said, you know something, I'm gonna box him. And all props to Gennady for being able to do that, to show his full game, his full repertoire to beat a Murata. Murata did a very good job. I think it was a great fight, period, just for the entertainment value. And Murata and Tagoe have raised their stock in losing efforts. They have raised their stock. When you say Tagoe now, people remember him. Okay, yeah, Tagoe, he fought bigger old Ryan Garcia and didn't look that bad. Murata was walking down, you know, Gennady Golovkin. And let me tell you, I don't know if anybody else was going to give Gennady Golovkin that much, you know, that, I mean, Chinko was also good against Gennady Golovkin, but not that dominant in 5 rounds, right? He was, you know, with him, but he wasn't that dominant. I think that Murata looked great those first 5 rounds, but you got to win the fight, though. My point here is because what happens when you got boxing, you know, all of a sudden you're on somebody's record, and everybody forget the details and forget, you know, how valiant some of these opponents are. You know, because sometimes when your opponent's uphill battle. Now, I'm not saying that about Murata because it was in Japan, his fight, right? So Gennady went there to fight him. But to know, Gennady had to beat the will out of this guy. He had to beat the confidence out of this guy because this guy was definitely coming to win the fight. Emmanuel Tagoe, he wasn't coming to win. He was coming to survive the fight and see what he can do. This guy was coming thinking totally he can win. And Gennady Golovkin was able to get that out of him, right? And that wasn't an easy thing to do. So both those fights, we had another fight with Lubin and Fandura, which Fandura was able to win. I haven't been able to see the whole fight yet, but that was also something. But, you know, it's just another thing to talk about. But right here, I'm just saying Gennady Golovkin handles his business against Murata, but Murata had a valiant effort, and Ryan Garcia handled his business versus Tagoe, but Tagoe had a good effort. I won't say valiant, but a good effort. And so, therefore, let's give a little props to the guys that lost the fight. The guys that are winning are going to move on to bigger and better things anyway, but these guys that lost, you know, let's look forward to seeing them in other fights. I'm going to tell you, like, again, about Murata. I didn't think of him as highly as I do now, for example, right? That's straight up. I didn't think of him as highly as I do now. And Tagoe, we didn't even really know, and now we do. So that's kind of cool too, don't you think? Doma Sports Talk Worldwide. And I'm about to hear y'all.